So what I'd like to do in the couple of minutes that, this is a sermonette, and it's a contest, okay? Can John give a sermonette? I'm standing in for another Miller, right? We'll see how this works. So what I'd like to do in the few minutes that we have here is share with you 2 L words that I believe exemplify the love of Christ. These 2 L words are the little and the lost. The little and the lost. Come with me to Matthew chapter 18. Here we have another one of those incidents where the disciples were concerned about position and power. They were on this topic seemingly from the beginning to the end, including the night of his crucifixion. Verse 1, at that time the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, "Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." So here we have the first L word, the little children, the little people, you might say. And I would just like to draw our attention for reflection for a minute on the 2 operative words in this passage. He didn't say, become as this little child. He said, unless you are converted and come to be as little children. And then the conclusion of the sentence is even more instructive. You're by no means even going to be there, so don't worry about the position. You're not going to be there. Now, these words here are very powerful because it speaks to how Christ viewed the little ones. Children. He said they're converted, and it's the same Greek word that is used for conversion throughout the New Testament. So, in essence, Jesus was saying, and of course 1 Corinthians chapter 7 talks about children being holy, told his disciples, the very people that were following him, that they needed to become like children, converted like children. Jesus had a special place in his ministry for the little ones. Go over just a page in Matthew chapter 19. We customarily bless children after the Feast of Tabernacles. And here is one of the passages in verse 13 where we take that custom from. Then the little children were brought to him that he might put his hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked them. Now, we don't have time. We've got this great ministry going on. We've got the gospel to preach. We've got, our way of doing things. So, the children are going to disrupt this whole thing. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." And he laid his hands on them and departed from there. So that's the passage. So, you look at this, and, the culture, if I read a commentary on this, and children in that culture were meant to be seen, not heard. For all you young parents, you try that out, it works, but children let themselves be heard. And I like to hear children because it shows that there's life and that there's a future. Now let's go over to Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. I said I would share 2 L words. One was little, and the other one was lost. Chapter 15 in verse 1, then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him. I mean, he drew a rather diverse audience. Sinners and tax collectors. Of course, the righteous of that day would have said that, well, tax collectors are sinners, and they were probably right. But everybody has sinned. And the Pharisees and the scribes murmured and said, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." I mean, that was unthinkable for the Pharisaical mind, to commune, to eat with a sinner. So he spoke a parable to them, saying, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until it's found?" I guess there are more L words in here now that I notice. You lose one sheep, or a sheep gets lost, and then he leaves the 99, and notice where he left them. Not in a very safe place. He left them, the 99 in the wilderness to seek out the lost. And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance. It's a very slimly veiled sarcasm, I guess is one way of putting it. The just person who needs no repentance. Have you ever met anybody like that? I've met people who thought so, but I have never met somebody that didn't need repentance. Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. In verse 27, here we have the account of the calling of the tax collector named Levi, which was also Matthew. He left all to follow Christ, but then he did something because he had means. Verse 29, and Levi gave him a great feast in his own house. And there were a great number of tax collectors and others who sat down with them, but the scribes and the Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous." That's interesting. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So what we see here is the inverse, which shouldn't surprise us, of normal human operating procedure and nature. Jesus sought after the lost and used the little ones as a standard of comparison in admonishing his disciples. I think that gives us an interesting perspective into the mind and service of Christ. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 18, where we were reading. Matthew 18, continuing, we read through verse 5. Whoever receives, no, actually, we only read through verse 4, so let's pick it up in verse 4. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Verse 6. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. I remember hearing that verse as a young lad in a pacifistic Amish congregation. I thought, well, that's not, that's pretty rough, you know. You talk about putting a millstone around somebody's neck and drowning them because they offended a little one. And not only that, just to make sure it works, you take him out in the middle of the sea where it is the deepest. It just, I mean, this is all part of the same conversation, and I think it shows the mind of Christ and how deeply he felt about this. We conclude in John chapter 6. John chapter 6. Verse 37. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will. If there's one thing that Jesus repeated consistently throughout his ministry, it was this, that I can do nothing except the will of my Father. I do not do anything on my own. And here he reiterates that. And then he defines the Father's will. Not to do my own will, but to do the will of him who sent me. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. This, to me, is one of the most encouraging passages in the New Testament, because Jesus said, it is the will of the Father that I do not lose anyone or any person that he has brought to me. So, I mean, we go through life and we have our challenges and we go here and we go there and we all fall short. I find it very encouraging that Jesus said it's the Father's will that he makes sure nothing is lost. Not the great ones, not the small ones, not the little ones, not the lost ones. Those are the two L's that I think exemplify the love of Christ. It was 14 minutes, 37 seconds, Mr. Hall.